if something big happened between Iran and Israel.
To be to be frank with you, um, I I'm not, let's say, I don't know very well the domestic politics in Pakistan. I know the broad lines as everybody probably, but I don't know exactly who and how this kind of support could materialize, and who would be willing to do that, and what are the implications. And that's for me, it remains a question mark. As to Pakistan, I don't know. As to Turkey, this is an interesting case because in the last decade, Turkey has definitely expressed its criticism, I mean, a very strong critical posture towards Israel, and has taken also a very strong position in favor of the Palestinians. And they even, I mean, Erdogan even said a few weeks ago, days ago, that Turkey is ready, or might or could invade Israel if needed. So I don't know whether it's just a rhetoric bravado or something like that. I have no idea. But they said it. The interesting point with Turkey is that it's a NATO country, and that's a very independent one, in the sense that we have seen also in the Ukrainian conflict that Turkey is able to take very independent stance towards the stakeholders, and it's the case here also. So they deliberately and decisively didn't take the posture of which is pro-US. So we may expect anything, but at the same time, I'm a bit, let's say, suspicious that Turkey would confront the US, for instance. I'm not sure they would do that. So therefore, you may, but it's also a part of the political game in the Middle East. Not so much in the Middle East, but also in the Middle East, but in the rest of the world. That the rhetoric is a way of fighting somehow, and what we do on the ground might not match exactly what we say, and probably what we say goes a little bit beyond what we are ready to do. uh, that's also something we need to take into account. So I'm not sure about Turkey, but interestingly enough, again, I'm coming back to the final communique of the Conference of the Islamic Cooperation, and we see that the wording is absolutely clear, that there is absolutely no excuse to Israel. And we see, and recently, I think I mentioned also on your channel that recently the League of Arab States, who had the Hezbollah as a terrorist organization since 2016 or 2017, if I'm not wrong, they decide to remove the Hezbollah from that list. Meaning that, because it's not just removing just a word from a listing, it has implications. That means that now they are legitimate to support the Hezbollah physically, materially, militarily, politically, because it's no longer a terrorist organization. And that, in my view, is the kind of indication we should take very seriously, because it shows that the Islamic community, because it's not just the Arab community, I remind people that the Iranians are not Arabs; they're they're Persians. It's a different culture. It's a different history as well, and so on. You know that better than me. But it's very important to say, because beyond the difference between Shia and Sunni, you have also this ethnic difference. And the fact that now everybody in the Middle East seems united to support Palestine against Israel is to me a very strong indication that if the Israel or if the conflict would expand into something regional, then probably that might be the end of Israel for good. And I'm not the only one to say that. I mean, if you read my book on the flood of Al-Aqsa, the first sentence, my first sentence in the book is precisely this one: is to say if we are not, if we don't pay any attention, Israel might disappear. And it's a quote from the Guardian, the British paper. It's a quote from the Guardian, meaning that the book was written in early this year, meaning that it's not a new assessment based on what we see today. It's something that some others, not just me, but others also assessed a few months ago. So, meaning that the prospect of having Israel annihilated uh, is something we should consider. And prior to engage into a large operation and internationalizing the conflict and so on and so forth, we should really think about this because that's what we may see. And if I were an advisor to the Israeli government, I would certainly make them aware of this possibility because, in my view, it's a very strong possibility. Because today, even if you have Jordan, Jordan, Egypt, and these countries, they take a pro US stance or apparently or seemingly pro-Israel stance because they don't want to be attacked by Israel because that's the problem. Israel is threatening everybody. Everybody who is not his friend is an enemy. So that's the reason why these countries who don't want to engage into a military conflict, they prefer to have a more lenient type of narrative or uh, um, wording towards Israel than. But if it happens that the Arab world would, or if we come to the point that the Israeli Palestinian conflict comes to a regional conflict, these countries will certainly join the other Arab countries. I mean, Jordan is a Palestinian country in essence. In essence, I mean, the majority of the population is Palestinian. By the way, Jordan, as it was called before 2022, it was the Transjordan. It was part of Palestine. I mean, the mandatory Palestine that was under British rule just after the end of the Ottoman Empire um, uh, contained Transjordan. I mean, you had the, um, the Palestine that, I mean, Israel today, if you want, plus Transjordan. And so, meaning that in Jordan, you have a lot of former Palestinians who took refuge after the 1948 war and the 1968 war. Some created problem and they were expelled, and then they went to Lebanon, and that created another problem. But that's another story. But in any case, you still have a lot of Palestinians in Jordan. The majority of the population is of the same extraction as the Palestinians. They are people, natives of that region, unlike the Israelis, who are not native of that region. So, for that reason, if we come to an international conflict, I think it would be extremely problematic for Israel, and that would be problematic for the U.S. too, because I'm not sure how the U.S. would react to that, because the only way to help Israel in such a situation would be to put boots on the ground. And I'm not sure that the U.S. would be ready for that. I mean, there are certainly certain warmongers who would be willing to do that, but probably not everybody, and certainly not the US population. As we see in polls, we see that the US is not willing to have, I mean, the population is not willing to enter a conflict in that region. And by the way, if it happens that the US gets committed in that region militarily, it doesn't mean that they might have success. Remember that the U.S. was defeated, were defeated in the Afghanistan, in Iraq, in I mean everywhere basically. So would they be more efficient and more successful in Israel? I'm not sure. By the way, the priority of the U.S. now is not the Middle East, is the Far East. So we see that that would be a very complicated equation for the U.S. So my view is that if there is someone rational in the Israeli government, they should start really some kind of talk process with the Palestinians. I'm not sure they are rational to that point, but in my view, that's the only way out of of this mess, because there will be no military solution on that. I mean, if there is, if it comes to the point that we see that there's only one solution on, but it will be a military solution, then I think that will be the end of Israel. If we come to the conclusion that the solution is political, then I think there will be a possibility to accommodate. That will be a very hard discussion, hard talks. I'm not, I'm sure this will be like squaring the circle, and that will be not easy. But this is, in my view, the only way keep to keep Israel as we would like it to have. I mean, based on the international law, based on borders that are accepted internationally, not as today, because Israel doesn't want to define its border precisely because it wants to expand. That's exactly that. By the way, that was decided the day I said before that Israel became independent on the 14th of May, 1948. And the day before, and that is in the memories of Ben Gurion, as he wrote his memories, and you can read that. And they discussed the matter of the border. And Ben Gurion explains in plain words that they didn't want to define the borders precisely because they didn't expect these borders to stay where they were. So we are exactly in that situation, and if as long as we don't have a situation on something which is extremely basic, such as defining the borders, like every country in the world, by the way, I think every country in the world has defined borders, and the UN has asked several times to Israel to define officially its borders, but Israel never complied and never responded to that request from the UN. So as long as we don't have this kind of solutions, or this kind of behavior and kind of a rational approach to a country that wants to integrate in its neighborhood, to integrate in the Middle East, Near East community, and wants to have friendly relationship with its neighbors. As long as we don't have that, we have the risk of war, and then the scenario that is what I explained might occur. That means the disparition of Israel. That's why I think here we have no Israel, in my view, rationally speaking, I said rationally speaking, has no alternative than having a rational dialogue with its neighbors, a rational dialogue with the Palestinians, which, by the way, Palestinians our neighbors or people in the region. So as long as this kind of talk or dialogue doesn't happen, I think we are towards the disparition of Israel, and many people, more and more people, are mentioning that. So I'm not the only one to say that, and that's a tragedy. That's a tragedy in a sense. But again, you can you cannot force anyone if he wants to make mistakes. Then
Yeah. And shifting the gears to the conflict.